Mirasee. There was once a wise rabbi who always seemed to have the answer to every question, every problem. Often the answer was simply another question, but he always knew what to say. Now, this rabbi had many students, and one day, two of his students were talking about how annoying it was that the rabbi always had all the answers. They thought it would be great to find a way that the rabbi could be wrong. Hi, I'm Lisa Bloom, the Story Coach, and you're listening to Once Upon a Business. In each episode, we explore a story, a fairy tale, folk tale, or traditional story, so that we can discover the amazing lessons relevant for business and for entrepreneurs. The very next day, one of the students of the rabbi came up with a great idea. He held out his hands and said to his friend, "Look here, I've caught a tiny bird, and I'm holding it in my hands. Let's go and ask the great rabbi a simple question that he can't possibly get right. We'll ask him if the bird is alive or dead. If he says the bird is dead, then I'll open my hands and let him fly away. But if the rabbi answers that the bird is alive, I'll simply squeeze my hands tight and prove him wrong. You see, finally, this time we'll prove the great rabbi wrong." So that very day, the two boys went up to the rabbi in front of all the other students. With his hands held out in front of him, the student said, "Great rabbi, I have a question for you. I have a bird in my hands. Is he alive or is he dead?" The rabbi thought for a moment. He rubbed his chin and said, "The answer to this, my dear boy, is in your hands." For such a short story, it's a very rich one, rich with meaning and implications, with some great lessons to consider. The two boys are in many ways just ordinary, mischievous boys trying to prank the teacher, trying to prove him wrong. Just the other day, one of my sons came back from school mumbling and grumbling about one of his teachers. My kid's sense of righteousness surprised me. I'd forgotten how much as a teenager kids feel that they need to prove and even defend themselves. And it's not just kids. Often in business and in the corporate world, we see people caught up in their ego, unwilling to learn from others, from people with more experience and wisdom. In fact, the ageism we see in the workforce is a perfect example of this. We would rather stumble around and make pointless mistakes, take unnecessary risks, than reach out to someone older, wiser, and with more experience and insight to help out. But I don't want to discount the mischievous nature of the boys. They also want to have some fun. I've always told this as a light-hearted story, and I think in their mischief that we see the importance of challenge and play in our lives and our work. There's a ton of research now that speaks to how if we play more as adults, we become more creative and more able to problem solve. The boys are learning from their mischief and their play, possibly as much as they would learn if they actually listened to the rabbi. It also speaks to the idea that there are many ways to learn, something my son often reminds me, that we don't have to be stuck in a classroom, but rather doing stuff, trying out new things and making decisions and mistakes. This is possibly a better learning environment than simply listening to the teacher. As an entrepreneur, a business owner, or an employee, we should take this lesson to heart, to listen to the wise people that came before us, but also to learn and experiment, to be playful and fun-loving, and to broaden our horizons and open up possibilities for new perspectives and new ideas. The rabbi is the other central character in the story. I love the choice he made in how to teach the boys in this moment when he was presented with what the boys thought was an impossible choice. They believed that he could find no way to be right. And as the listeners to the story, despite the horror of the boys' willingness to kill the bird, we believe what they say is true, that there is no way for the rabbi to win this discussion. The boys are so blinded by their own perspective that they're willing to kill an innocent bird just to prove the rabbi wrong. It's amazing what we're willing to do when we get locked into an idea or determined to prove the other person wrong. Unfortunately, it's not that unusual to see a form of this in business. Maybe people don't go around squishing birds, but we've all definitely seen people do things that are not in the best interests of others or of themselves or of the business, and just to prove that they're right or to take someone else down. It's also a surprise to us, the listener, when the rabbi comes up with the alternative choice. And it's a relief, and one of those moments where the answer is so obvious, but we could never have thought of it ourselves. We get caught up in the boy's mischief. We can't see another way of seeing the world. In business, this is a real danger, that we see the world only through the perspective of the people in the room. And often if we had another perspective, we would see different opportunities, different ways of doing what we do. This reminds us that the more diverse our influences, the more likely we're able to see innovation and opportunities in our work. Going back to the story, the rabbi could have scolded the boy for even considering taking the bird's life, or for his mischievous behavior. But instead, the rabbi decides to empower the boy, to give him the chance to find his way, to do the right thing. He helps the boy see that in this moment, he has the ability to be petty or cruel, or to see beyond his ego desire to be right and prove the rabbi wrong. It's a great lesson for all of us. In every moment, we have the choice to rise up and be empowered to do the right thing, to reach out for the wisdom of others, to learn and evolve and grow from listening to the experience of others, to strive to always do the right thing, to work from a place of generosity and possibility, to go beyond our own limited vision and to create something great. So the question that the boy proposes to the rabbi, he says, I have a bird in my hands. Is he alive or dead? And if the rabbi says dead, he's going to release the bird and prove that he's wrong. And if, of course, the rabbi says it's alive, then he's just going to squish his hand, squish the bird. And I think as he says that, it's very easy for us, the listener, to imagine and go, that's horrible. I don't want him to squish the bird. That's a terrible thing. But as we go through the story and then we hear the end and the rabbi pauses for a moment, he thinks and he rubs his chin. And then finally he says, the answer to this question, my dear boy, is in your hands. And I love the idea that we could imagine what happens next, that the boy holding that bird in his hands pauses and thinks and really considers the choices that he has in his hand, but also in his life. And then gets that insight, understands the wisdom that the rabbi has offered to him, and opens his hands and lets the bird just fly away. And everybody's smiling, and everybody is suddenly enlightened by this beautiful wisdom that the world is full of choice, and we can always choose to let ourselves and let others be free. I love to imagine that moment as the final conclusion of where this story could go. And so I invite you to experience that too. I'm Lisa Bloom, and you've been listening to Once Upon a Business. You can find out more about me at story-coach.com. That's story-coach.com. Once Upon a Business is part of the Mirasee FM podcast network, which also includes such shows as Just Between Coaches and Course Lab. This episode of Once Upon a Business was produced by Cynthia Lamb. Jeff Govertson and Melissa Deal assembled the episode. Danny Inney is our executive producer. Post-production was by Post Office Sound. So you don't miss the episodes that are coming up on Once Upon a Business, please follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now. And if you like the show, please leave us a starred review. It really does help us out. Thank you. We'll see you next time.